Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today we're going to be covering our Dynasty quarterback rankings with tiers. We'll be going through the top 30 quarterbacks, but we will not be including rookies. The reason being is because we believe a draft capital and landing spot will be a huge determining factor as to where we put them in our tiers. We are going to wait until after the NFL draft. Before we get started, we are a new channel. So if you like this content, we're asking you to smash that like button so others can find our video as well. So Joe, let's get to it.
Hike!
So I'm going to be going through 7 tiers, and Joe's going to be giving his reaction. I have 10 players that did not make the cut. The 10 players that I left off this list are Gardner Minshew, Bailey Zappi, Mitchell Trubisky, Marcus Mariota, Kyle Trask, Carson Wentz, Sam Darnold, Malik Willis, Jameis Winston, and Zach Wilson. So starting off with my 30th quarterback, he's the farthest on the tier 7. It's quarterback Desmond Ridder, the former third-round pick for the Atlanta Falcons. Now that Marcus Mariota is no longer the quarterback, Desmond Ridder is going to have his opportunity for the starting job, and he most likely will have the entire season to be able to prove that he's worth to be a starting quarterback, unless Taylor Heineke ends up taking the job from him. I kind of doubt that. But, he's unproven. So to me, he is a starter, and that's why he's in this list. And that's why he's in tier 7. I'm not really a big fan of his. I don't think he's going to, do that well, but he did show some flashes, so we'll see. Then I got at number 29, tier 7, I've got Sam Howell. Same idea here. Sam Howell looks like he is going to have the keys to the car. That is the quarterback job for the Washington Commanders, the former 5th-round pick. I believe he played in 1 or 2 games last year. And then they saw enough from him last year to, make him the starter this year. Not convinced that he'll hold that job. He's got Jacoby Brissett as well, who's been a journeyman quarterback, who has shown that he's capable of being a starter and winning games. So time will tell there. Then the next quarterback I got, and some will be surprised by this, but I've got Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford's a great quarterback. He's had a great career. But the reason why I have him so low is because I'm very concerned about that injury that he suffered last year. Could have been career-ending, may still be career-ending. If it's not, time will tell how much longer he truly has. The Rams organization is crumbling, it seems like, by the day. So I got him here in tier 7. Then I got Ryan Tannehill. I think his days are numbered in Tennessee, and I think his days are numbered as a starting quarterback. I wouldn't be surprised if the Titans end up drafting a quarterback. He's only got a 1-year deal left for the Titans, and after that, I don't think he's going to end up being a starter. Next guy I got is Baker Mayfield. Baker has had a tumultuous season up to this point, but he will have a great opportunity in Tampa Bay. Might be his most high-powered offense he's ever been a part of. So I'm not sure how he's going to do. He looked horrible in Carolina, but then showed flashes in LA. But he's unproven, or at least he's not been consistent enough for me to have him in a higher tier. Then I got Jared Goff. I know Joe's going to disagree with me on this one, but to me, I know he had a really good season last year, kind of a resurgent. He's had a resurgence, honestly, in Detroit. I think LA thought that they were sending Jared Goff to Siberia, to never return when he went to Detroit, but he's helped turn that team around. I'm just not convinced he stays as the starter for much longer. I think they have their eye on bringing in a rookie quarterback and really helping this team, kind of take the next step. And so I'm concerned about his future, and that's why for me I have him in tier 7. Then I got Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant from last year. Had that UCL injury. It'll be interesting to see how he comes back from it. I know, they have said in the San Francisco organization, John Lynch has said that he is going to be the starter, but he will have to fend off Trey Lance and possibly Sam Darnold. We'll see. I think he is a leader in the clubhouse, but I just have to see it more from him. But he has potential definitely to move up a few tiers. Then I got Kenny Pickett. The Steelers fans are gonna just boo me out the video for this take, but I don't understand why people were so excited about Kenny Pickett. I know, remember I guess he had the clutch gene or whatever and was able to close out some games. But if you look at the stats, he did not put up a lot of really high powering stats. To me, it was very underwhelming. So until I see him, this is fantasy we're talking about here. So, until I see him do a lot more, I need to, see it to believe it. And then I got Mac Jones on my last quarterback in tier 7. When it comes to Mac Jones, I think he has shown some promise. He had a really bad season last year, but how much of that was because of the Matt Patricia, Joe Judge horror show that was an offensive coordinator, game plan, whatever you want, a debacle. So, I don't think Bailey Zappi will be the starter. There's rumblings about that. I expect him to have a bounce back year with Bill O'Brien. But, he's on the hot seat. I think he's definitely on the bubble, and so hard to put him at a higher tier than tier 7.
That's there's a lot to unpack in this tier there, Steve. First and foremost, I just can't believe you disrespected Jared Goff the way that you did, man. Put him in this tier with a bunch of unproven, either guys coming off their rookie year or a guy like Mac Jones who just has been inconsistent as a starter, and some aging veterans that are possibly on their way out here. He definitely belongs in your tier 6. I mean, I see in the next one, it looks like you even have Jordan Love ahead of him, which I think is absolutely insane. We haven't seen Jordan Love really play much football, but the football that I have seen, he belongs in that tier 7, if you ask me. I'd have Jared Goff probably, definitely ahead of Jimmy G there as well. He'd probably be right around the Derek Carr range for me. I'm not concerned as far as, you're talking about some Detroit drafting a guy to replace him. Detroit's a team that's looking to compete right now, and Jared Goff is the perfect quarterback for them to go ahead and do that. And it was a Potens Lions offense last year. I don't, see why it can't be again this year. Jamison Williams should really help that offense as well, growing in his second year here. So yeah, I like Jared Goff, and tier 7. I think it's a lot of disrespect on Jared Goff.
Yeah, well, there's probably going to be others who feel the same way as you, as they'll probably think I'm absolutely nuts and have some choice words for me as to why I have the players I do have in there. But hey, this is my take, and I'm not going to just follow the consensus. I have to give my spin.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what you got to say for Jordan Love being in your tier 6. I don't know. I am very interested to see your argument for this.
Well, going into tier 6, the first quarterback I got here on the far right is Jimmy Garoppolo. And, I honestly considered putting him in tier 7. I really did. He hasn't been able to stay healthy. He hasn't been able to be consistent. But, the Raiders offense is still a good offense. And this might be the best system fit that he has had in his career as far as a starter. So, the reason why the Niners ended up trading for him so many years ago was because of what he was able to do in New England. So I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe I shouldn't, but that's why I have him in tier 6. Then I have Geno Smith. Geno is a really tough one for me. No one maybe there were a few, but hardly anybody had expected what he did last year. I mean, if anyone thought he was going to be a QB1, I mean, that's incredible. I don't know what to think moving forward. I don't think he's the quarterback for the future for them. I know he signed that long-term extension, but they can get out of it pretty quickly. And I think they have 2 first-round picks this year. I could definitely see them drafting a quarterback. And so I think for the reason why I have him there is because I just don't know how much longer he'll be relevant. Then I got Trey Lance. He's probably one of the most polarizing players, as far as the quarterback position goes. At the end of the day, I just believe in his talent. He just hasn't had enough opportunities, in my opinion. I know the court of public opinion is quite against him, but the sample size is so low. It might be better for him if he ends up going to a new team, and just getting out of that San Francisco organization. Time will tell if that will happen or not. But it's just hard for me. Maybe I'm biased because I drafted in the first round. I just want to hold on for dear life. But I'm hoping that something turns around. Then I got Jordan Love, who, Joe criticizes me for in tier 6. I think for me, it's the potential factor. The Green Bay Packers have been able to develop quarterback. They've had Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, and now Jordan Love, and they followed the same template of having a guy sit for multiple years, letting them, kind of develop behind the scenes, and then they get thrust into the starting role. Packers have a decent nucleus for him, I believe, to succeed. And from what he has been able to do, he's done okay. He hasn't done great, but I think they'll give him a pretty big leash, I would say. Like I don't think I think he's got at least this year and probably next year. I can't imagine that they would just give him a 1-year audition and then move away from him after they've invested so much time and energy into developing him. But to me, it's a potential factor. And the reason why I have him over Goff is because I think he has a higher ceiling than Goff. Yes, Goff has a higher floor. But, I tend to look at the ceilings. I don't want – floors most likely aren't going to win me a championship. I need to pick players that eventually are going to hit. And, to me, I don't ever see Jared Goff becoming a tier 2 or tier 3 player. Jordan Love, who knows? Maybe he has the potential to do that. And that's why, for me, I have him in this tier 6. And then the last guy I got is Derek Carr in tier 6. We've had our disagreements when it comes to Carr. I think that he can do really well in New Orleans. Got a decent nucleus, not as good as the Raiders last year. I don't know how much of a relevant quarterback he will be going forward, but he's been a borderline, QB2, QB1. Has been pretty consistent. I think he'll be in the league for a few more years. But I'll tell you, I would rather, at this point in time, I have Carr there, but I'd much rather have, I think Love and Lance for the future. It's just, Carr's proven, so I have to put him there, I feel like.
Yeah. Man, I've first glance before, I didn't realize Trey Lance was in this tier as well. I mean, you got the potential third string quarterback for the 49ers ahead of the starter quarterback, and a guy that was averaging over 300 yards a game towards when he had a chance, and Brock Purdy last year for the 49ers. That's really interesting. The only way for Trey Lance at this point for that sample size to grow, like you mentioned, is for him to get out of San Fran. And I don't know. I've always had my doubts against the guy. I don't know if he's really going to turn into something, but it's wild that you think Jordan Love could potentially go into that tier 2, tier 3 conversation. It'll be interesting to see. He looks like he's going to take over the reins there in Green Bay. It'll be interesting to see what he can do with a full season. I'm just not sure what his potential is. It kind of a mixed bag that we've gotten to see when he's gotten his chance to play a few games here and there when Rodgers is hurt. So definitely will be interesting to monitor his progress and see how he does.
So I got 3 guys in tier 5. So the first guy I got is, quarterback Daniel Jones, the worst in tier 5. Now, a lot of people are probably going to be against me, but I think the hype train on Daniel Jones is way, way too high. I know people will point to his rushing ability, and everybody wants to say, oh, well, because he has that rushing ability, he's so valuable. And I get that, and that's a fair assessment. But to me, I think people we're way too biased as to what happened last season. Yes, they got Darren Waller coming in, so you could expect him to have better numbers. And I believe in Brian Daboll as a coach. But at the end of the day, I don't really believe that Daniel Jones is going to be the future for them. And I need to see it to believe it. We've only had one good season. And if anything, I think it was good. It wasn't great. So for me, I can't see him being any higher than this tier. Then I got Russell Wilson. This one was a tough one for me. I actually considered putting him in tier 4, but probably because I didn't want to get booed out of the auditorium, I put him in tier 5. When it comes to Russell, I think you kind of almost have to throw out last year. I think last season was just an absolute just disaster with Nathaniel Hackett. If this were to happen again with Sean Payton, we're talking Russell Wilson dropping. He could drop. He could honestly go drop down to tier 7. Honestly, if he really just bottoms out next year, but I don't believe that's going to happen. I think he's going to have a rebound year. And he's still young enough. I want to say he's in the, kind of like early to mid 30s. So he's got a few more years left under his belt. So I got Russell there. And then lastly, I got Aaron Rodgers in tier 5. So much mystery around Rodgers. Who knows where he's going to go, who he's going to play for. It's probably going to be the Jets, but for how long? And I think the Jets offense, it's good. It's not great. You've got Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall coming back from an ACL. So we'll have to see. Had a lackluster season last year, but then was the MVP the past 2 seasons. But I just think you just don't know when he's going to retire, so I feel like I can't have him any higher.
Yeah, I think actually, this is the first tier. I think, you've gotten pretty fair grades on. You know, I agree. I think I'd like to see Daniel Jones, do it again one more time this year with Dable and see if he can't even improve on his numbers or at least just, come somewhere around what he did last year. I kind of agree with the sentiment that, he was definitely good, not great, but I feel like, he was better for the actual Giants play, I feel like, than necessarily for fantasy, but a lot of the benefit of his fantasy was the ability to run. And I agree with you. I do expect Russell Wilson to take that next step with Sean Payton this year and kind of rebound and come back to the player that we knew him when he played for the Seattle Seahawks. But, definitely will be interesting to see if last year was what we can expect from Russell or if Sean Payton can get out the best of him.
Yeah, so going into tier 4, we've got 13 quarterbacks left. So my 13th quarterback is going to be Kirk Cousins, and a lot of people are not going to like that. But to me, I feel like he gets disrespected a lot. I understand he's very vanilla. He's a very vanilla quarterback, but he puts up the numbers. He can time and time again. He ends up putting up a numbers. And last year, he had a fantastic season. So, I don't know what his long-term future is in Minnesota. I'd even, I think, heard some rumblings or saw like on Twitter the possibility that the Niners were interested in possibly trading for Kirk Cousins. So, when it comes to Kirk Cousins, it's hard to know. To me, the proof's in the pudding. I mean, he has been consistent. He's been very good. I don't necessarily love him either, but how can I not put him, on this spot because he continues to, perform from a fantasy perspective. Then I've got Kyler Murray. I'm out on Kyler Murray pretty strongly, and I even considered putting him lower. But again, I wanted to not go too overboard. But when it comes to Murray, he's coming back from an ACL injury. He has relied on his legs a good amount for his fantasy value. So how does that change? DeAndre Hopkins most likely gone. So what is that offense going to look like? And, I think Kyler was overrated. And I think it showed last season that he's been overrated. I don't really know what to expect from him, honestly. And you hear all these different conversations about him as a leader in the locker room and all this other stuff. And I don't really know how that's going to unfold. I'm sort of concerned about that. Then I got Dak Prescott. Honestly, this is kind of like the vanilla group, honestly. Like they're just kind of like they're like you're happy with it, but it's not fantastic. And with Dak, he's honestly, if I could talk about any quarterback, I feel like he's Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. There's one game he's going to get you QB1 numbers. He's going to score you 30, 40 points. You're going to be super happy. The next week, he ends up throwing a dud against the worst Houston Texans team in the league. And then you're like, what are you doing? I find Dak to be a very frustrating player to have. But, there are time and time again he is able to perform, and he is in a very fantasy-friendly offense. So that's why I got him there. And then I got Tua. And, Tua, it's hard to know with all his injury concerns, with all the concussions, what does his future hold? But, his season last year, he had a phenomenal season outside the injuries. And I just can't look away from that potential. The potential is just too great. But I am taking the injury kind of concern as a factor, and that's why I have him here.
Yeah. I think I think tier 4 is not a bad place for Tua. There's no doubt his talent is there and his potential is there. Just the concussion issue is definitely a major concern. Just watching him play last year and how frequently that happened for him, and people are even saying like he shouldn't even come back to play this year. So definitely interesting to see how that unfolds. I feel like Kirk Cousins gets disrespected as far as fantasy goes, and I think that has to do with how much people like harp on him because of his play in the actual NFL, how he can't win the primetime games, how he doesn't win the big one for playoffs. But, like you said, you just can't deny that he puts up the numbers in fantasy, and I think he definitely deserves to be, where you've got him in the top 13 here at least. But I'm with you as far as Kyler Murray. I agree. I'm definitely I'm out on him. I think you potentially could have justified putting him in the tier below in tier 5, but he does have a little more potential, if he can stay healthy or figure things out. But I don't know. Cardinals got to figure out how to get him some weapons, and I don't know if Dak is definitely one of the more frustrating quarterbacks to have for fantasy. Like you said, he'll have the big game for you. He's got the potential to be that QB1, but then there's games like you mentioned where it looks like a smash play against the Texans, and then you're like, what in the world is going on here?
Yeah, that's the tough part with him. And I think with Kyler, at one point you probably had him in a tier 1 or tier 2, maybe a few years back. So it's hard because you've seen him do it before, and he has the talent, but it just will it happen again?
Yeah, that's truly the question. We've seen him with the injuries. He's got to figure out a different way to play the game. I think he's just not durable enough to scramble around and take the hits that he has. But then if he's not running as much, it also takes a lot away from his fantasy upside and potential. So it really lowers him more of a floor. So then he's not even that exciting for fantasy. If he does have to change up his gameplay and figure out how to be more of a pocket passer.
So now going over to tier 3, I got 3 quarterbacks in this group. This is a tough quarterback group for me, and I'm going to actually have a bold take on this, which I'll share at the end. I'll get your thoughts on this, Joe. But the first guy I got there, so number 9 in this group, is Lamar Jackson. Lamar, I think people continue to reference his rushing numbers and his MVP season, but his MVP season was a few years ago. And, when it comes to Lamar, who knows what's going on with him in Baltimore? I guess he recruited OBJ, and Baltimore is convinced that he'll come back. I don't know. I feel like we've seen the best of Lamar, and people are trying to chase back the greatness of what he was before. To me, I'm not that all that. I know I have him in tier 3. I think he is a very talented player. I just feel like we may have already seen the best, and people just keep chasing after it like it's going to happen again. Then I got Deshaun Watson, and this could be bullish of me because he looked horrible last year. But I'm basically throwing that out to him getting reacclimated to football, all the nerves that he was experiencing with everything that transpired. So when it comes to Deshaun Watson, I think that he's going to do better next year. I think that he may never be the Deshaun Watson of old as far as his performance goes, but I think that Deshaun Watson, we'll see more flashes of what we remember of how he played. And then lastly, I got Justin Fields, as my 7th quarterback, and he's in tier 3. With Fields, I think people are way too high on Fields, way, way too high. I mean, the industry has got him as like a top 3, top 5 quarterback and redraft next year. I get it. I understand the potential. I saw the running ability. And there have been quarterbacks that have purely just done that, and they've had great seasons. But I think it needs to be a combination of both. We see that in the likes of even a guy like a Josh Allen. So I just don't know if he can support the offense that's around him. I know they have DJ Moore. I know they have, they trade for Claypool. They've got these pieces around him. I really need to see it to believe it with Fields. I just don't know if I believe it. And if it was me, this is my bold take. I actually am pretty decently high on this rookie class. I would rather trade Fields and get one of those rookies plus a ton else, because I could probably get a ton for Fields, than just roll with Fields. I actually traded Fields in our Dynasty League, and that wasn't even at his highest peak. I probably should have kept him, and I probably could get even more for him. But I just think right now his price is just absolutely absurd.
Yeah, his price is absurd, but I mean, I don't know. I'm a Justin Fields fan. I thought he was the best quarterback coming out of that draft class when the Bears took him, and just seeing his potentially emerge last year. Yeah, I think he could. I think the fun thing is with Fields and why everyone's so excited, because if he just gets a little better, in the passing game, and they kind of unlock him more in the passing attack, bringing in DJ Moore, just another weapon for him. That was really the problem. They didn't really have a lot of weapons for him, but he used his legs a lot. That's great for fantasy, but just for longevity, I'd like to see him run less and really become more of a prolific passer. But I think he definitely does have the arm talent to be a better passer. And that's a pretty hot take. I would definitely rather have Justin Fields than these rookie quarterbacks coming out. But,
well, not just 1-to-1. I mean, it would be the quarterback plus a ton extra, I think.
Yeah, I don't know what the ton extra is, and I'll take the proven, somewhat proven commodity over these, the potential or what could happen. I've seen Justin Fields play in the NFL, and I've liked what I've seen. It's going to be interesting to see how he changes up his game as people try to scheme and take his legs away. But I agree with you in a sense of Lamar Jackson and people kind of chasing the stats from in the past in his MVP season, because as the whole Lamar Jackson saga, and everyone just keeps bringing up, well, he was a former MVP and all these stats. Well, as you mentioned, his MVP season was a few years ago, and talk about a guy who's missed a decent amount of games here the last couple of seasons since that MVP season as well. So he just tough guy to kind of rely on, and fantasy, he's another one of those inconsistent quarterbacks as well.
So going over to tier 2, again, people are going to not like this, but I'm just going to say it anyways. My 6th quarterback and third in tier 2 is Jalen Hurts. I know some people believe Jalen Hurts is a tier 1 quarterback, and he had, what could have been an MVP season last year, had he not gotten hurt there the last few games. But for me, and maybe this is not right of me, but it feels very reminiscent to me of Lamar Jackson's MVP season where he took the league by storm. I want to see it again from Hurts. Now that teams have a full year of tape of what Nick Sirianni really wanted to implement with that offense, because, he had the first year together and he was okay. Second year, everything took off. I really want to see how teams defend the Eagles heading into this next season. And I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that. And if I'm wrong, I'll take the L on that. But to me, it's very reminiscent to me of the Lamar Jackson MVP season, and people are still chasing that. I think people are really biased based on what happened just last season. I just want to see more from him, with really nothing added to that offense right now. It's the same cast of characters besides Miles Sanders no longer being there. Then I got Justin Herbert. I mean, Herbert's been a model of consistency, but he has, had dealt with some injury type issues, and there have been some moments where he has not performed. I think people really expecting him to take that next jump. I think people really were seeing Herbert possibly as a tier 1 quarterback, and I think he had a disappointment last year. But he has been, one of the more dynamic quarterbacks in the league. We've seen that. He has a very fantasy-friendly offense with the likes of Keenan Allen and Josh Palmer and Mike Williams, Austin Eckler. So time will tell. But obviously he's a great quarterback. You're very happy with him if you have him. Then I got Trevor Lawrence as my top quarterback in tier 2. Again, I know people may disagree with me on this, but to me, you've got to throw out the Urban Meyer year. To me, that was a complete anomaly. It was a complete nightmare. When Urban Meyer was there, Doug Peterson was able to implement his offense the first year. We were able to see why so many people raved about Trevor Lawrence. Now you got Calvin Ridley coming in that offense. I mean, that offense is stacked. You got Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, even Zay Jones, to my surprise, had a good season. But you got Evan Ingram, you got Travis Etienne. I mean, this offense is one of the best in the league. So for me, if you like the Jalen Hurts jump, when from year 1 to year 2 with Nick Sirianni, when AJ Brown came in, then I can't see why you can't expect Trevor Lawrence to take another jump himself. Now Calvin Ridley's coming in that offense, and now it's year 2 of Doug Peterson's offense. So I like Lawrence a lot. So as you can see, I'm pretty high on him.
Yeah, you definitely are. I don't really have a problem with the 3 guys you got there. I'd probably, flip-flop Lawrence and Hurts myself. I think the difference between Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson, honestly, I think Hurts is just the better thrower and the better passer. So I don't really have a concern with Jalen Hurts, dipping down as much as Lamar Jackson has since that MVP season. Jalen Hurts also is playing in a way better offense with a lot more weapons than Lamar Jackson has had. They still have a pretty good offensive line, even though they lost some guys. along it, and AJ Brown's still there, probably still going to be a rush first offense. So, I think it's fair to want to see it again for Hurts and leave him at the number 2. I think I like Justin Herbert. Where you've got him. I think he's potentially going to make a jump this year with Kellen Moore as offensive coordinator. I think Kellen Moore will definitely be able to maximize that offense and get the best with the change at offensive coordinator. With, like you said, with the weapons that they have. So I'm really interested to see Justin Herbert this year, and I think it's fair to say Trevor Lawrence will take a jump. With the Doug Peterson offense in his second year, I totally agree with you. Just taking out his rookie season with Urban Meyer, I mean, that just was a circus with Urban Meyer the first year as the coach, and I'm excited to see what they do with Calvin Ridley. What I want to see this year from Trevor Lawrence is for him just not to make those stupid throws for interceptions, and start just dialing it a little more and make these easy throws and just keep moving the ball down the field.
So for you, you've got the same guys in tier 2, but you would go Hurts, Herbert, and then Lawrence.
Yeah, I'd flip flop Hurts and Lawrence myself. Yeah,
and none of them are in tier 1. They'd all be tier 2 guys.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I feel like they're definitely I think Herbert and Hurts, or even Lawrence. I feel like they're kind of they're tier 2, but this upcoming season, depending on what they do, I feel like they could make a jump into the quote unquote tier 1.
So going into tier 1, I got 3 guys. So my third quarterback overall and the first in tier 1 is Joe Burrow. I honestly considered putting Burrow at a tier 2 because I do think the next 2 guys are the cream of the crop as far as the quarterbacks go. But, Joe Burrow has been able to be, really a model of consistency other than that Pittsburgh Steelers game where he threw a ton of interceptions. He's really been able to perform at a high level. He's got one of the most fantasy-friendly offenses with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Mixon. Who knows, who the running back will be moving forward. But Burrow is just continuing to settle in. He's one of the most elite quarterbacks. I do think, though, a little bit of a hot take here. I do think Joe Burrow might be a better quarterback in real life than he is a fantasy quarterback. And I think a lot of times people associate that because he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. I don't think anyone would say. I think Mahomes is the best. But, if you wanted to say that, Burrow is number 2 or right behind Mahomes, I think a lot of people try to connect it back to his actual play versus his fantasy production. Then I got number 2 is Josh Allen. I think Josh Allen has been able to show that he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. I mean, I am biased. I'm a Bills fan. But his combination of running and passing, I don't think really there's anybody like him, really maybe other than Jalen Hurts last season. Has also a very fantasy-friendly offense. Will be interesting to see. You hear, the likes of Sean McDermott, and even Ken Dorsey talking about how, they don't want Allen to take as many hits. So, will his fantasy production take a dip over time if he's not involved as much of those quarterback sweeps and those just direct snaps that he ends up taking? Will be interesting. I'd like to see them add a receiver. I think they will in the draft. But time will tell. And then lastly is Mahomes. Mahomes is definitely the number 1 guy here. Hard not to put him there. I think people really had their doubts about him. And I sort of had my doubts as well. Maybe not as much as some. But with Tyreek Hill heading over to Miami, I think people really expected Mahomes to take a step back. And boy, did he prove a ton of people wrong. He is definitely seems like team proof. Now, some will say, once Travis Kelce is gone, then he'll take a dip. But I'm not buying it. I mean, this guy just continues to produce year in, year out with all the off-platform throws and the way he's able to scramble and get out of to evade the rusher. So to me, he definitely is the number 1 guy.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you in the sense that Joe Burrow, he definitely feels like a better quarterback in real life than actually in fantasy. But I feel like a lot of that is just because he's pretty consistent. what he's going to give you for fantasy. And I feel like what holds him back a little bit compared to, an Allen or Mahomes as well is he just can't, he doesn't do as much with the rushing and gaining the points there and with like rushing touchdowns. That's really, what gives Josh Allen the edge over him. I'd say it'll be interesting to see, Josh Allen's fantasy output if he's not the Bills, number one option at running back as well as quarterback, and them using him as their leading rusher and getting all the rushing touchdowns. But yeah, it's hard to argue Patrick Mahomes being number one. I definitely was concerned about his fantasy production taking a little bit of a dip without Tyreek Hill around, and just the changing around some of the weapons that they had. Bringing in Juju and MVS. Not sure how that was going to work out, but as you mentioned, it just didn't really matter. He just did it no matter who was around him, and as long as he's got Kelsey, that was good to go. It definitely will be interesting to see, see if anything changes without Bieniemy. Probably not, because it's still Andy Reid's system. Or if Travis Kelsey leaves, if anything changes for Mahomes.
Yeah, and I was thinking too when it comes to Burrow, I think possibly some of the reason why I believe Allen and Mahomes. I do think there's a gap between Burrow and then Allen and Mahomes in fantasy. I think part of the reason why you could think of that is when you think about the Chiefs and the Bills, there's no run support. There's no running back that's taking a huge amount of carries, to kind of change the game. Mahomes, he might not be running all over the place, but he's throwing, 50 plus times a game. And with Allen, he's got the combination of running and throwing. But, with Burrow, he's got Mixon, or he's had Mixon. So and even Samaje Perine, you could say, when he's came in and kind of spelled, Joe Mixon, he's been able to do really well. So I think that's also part of the reason why. Let's see what happens when Burrow doesn't have a guy like Mixon, and if they always are throwing, do you see his numbers really take a step in the right direction and increase? I don't know. Yeah,
I still don't think they used Mixon enough. For there wasn't that many games I feel like that he eclipsed the 20 carry mark or 20 rushes. So I feel like they did still pass a lot of the time in Cincinnati. Of course, Mixon always had somewhere probably around 16 to 18 carries. And then you mix in Perine, probably somewhere around 30 rushing attempts per game or something like that. But I feel like they definitely ran more than the Chiefs and Bills, though, to your point.
So that concludes our top 30 Dynasty quarterback rankings with tiers. If you enjoyed this content, we ask you please like this video so others can find it. Comment below. What is your reaction to our quarterback rankings and tiers for Dynasty? If you haven't done so yet, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. We also recently have joined Apple and Spotify podcasts, so you can join us there as well. But thank you so much for watching, and until next time.